Well, joining me is the host of the Bolt Report, Andrew Bolt. Andrew, happy Easter and thanks for taking time out of your weekend to talk with me.
A pleasure. Nice to have the roles reversed.
Listen, is it possible, do you think, that wokeness will be the iceberg that sinks the West? It seems to me the brightest minds in the West are now completely preoccupied with nonsense. Meanwhile, countries not engaging with it have an increasing advantage the longer this madness persists.
I just think it's one aspect of us tribalising, developing little tribes, sub-national sort of tribes of identity, whether it's racial or gender or ethnicity or whatever, religious. We're increasingly finding our identity in much smaller groups than the national one. And there's always, it's never all one or all the other. But it is a growing tendency that this is a nation of tribes where we struggle to define what is us. In fact, the ABC, I think it was last year, cautioned staff not to refer to an us because it had too many assumptions in it.
What do you think is driving that? Because, I mean, if you go back, 15, 20 years, it seemed like we were going along quite well. Rights for women, rights for LGBTQ community members, relationships between Indigenous people and non-Indigenous people. And then all of a sudden, everything just seemed to go crazy.
Oh, all these things take a long time to germinate. It starts with one person sitting in their university office thinking this would be a fun thing, and then off it takes time to become an avalanche. Look, part of it's Christianity has lost its glue. It was the faith of the overwhelming majority of Australians. Now it's about half and probably falling. And also the trashing of the national identity. I mean, a lot of young Australians have grown up thinking Australia's, haven't been taught so, that Australia's quite shameful, and so they want to be part of something bigger and better than themselves, and so they look for other causes, other issues. I mean, I think it's quite remarkable that we're getting a lot of these debates, like on trans issues or whatever it is, and people are not interested in talking to each other to sort out their differences. It's not like, let's have a big debate. I'll put my opinion, you put yours, and we'll just toss out the ideas. We'll have a little argument, and then we'll come to a conclusion. It's not that at all. Now it's just a platform for screaming abuse at each other, a little 2-minute hate, sort of Orwellian 2-minute hate, in order to reinforce group identity, demonise the other, and feel that you're in a hugger-mugger better tribe than the other lot.
I think you're quite right. I mean, you rarely hear a good argument these days. Oh, for a great argument, but no one wants to argue. They just want to chant 3-word slogans as if that constitutes an argument.
Well, it's even more than that. I mean, I remember, was it 10 years ago or something? I still could have interviews with Tim Flannery twice on the radio. And it didn't go, I know it didn't go well for him, but that said, he announced the policy that he was never going to platform people like me again. And it wasn't him that started, of course, but you had this whole deplatforming movement. We will not legitimise the other side by having a debate with them, which means, really, we will not have a debate with people and maybe be proved wrong, right? They didn't want that. And so that's what you see. You don't get debates between, or very many at all, between people who think global warming is going to ruin us all and be a disaster, and people who think, like me, who think, well, actually, things are going pretty well, and maybe a little warming, and there's only been a little warming, might actually be good for humanity. And let's have a debate about that. Cost, benefit. You don't see that, do you? And you don't see it really on The Voice either now. It's really quite remarkable.
I've got to ask you, if that's the case then, how do we ever make progress as a society? If we're not going to argue ideas back and forwards without someone getting triggered or offended and cancelling the other side, how do we ever make progress?
I don't know that we can. I mean, ideas are now weapons. They're not, hey, I've got a better idea to improve society, let's discuss. If I'm wrong, please prove it. But if I'm right, wouldn't it be good? It's now, look, I've got an idea, you're using sensitive language, smack, boff, biff. And there's no forgiveness. If you really look right now, it's very hard for people to get forgiveness. You can apologise, it doesn't do you any good. And also you can see now that with the cancel culture left, they turn on their own now because, being excluded from the group, well, being excluded from any group is very painful for humans, but from the left group, that's terrifying for a lot of people. So that's where you're now starting to see they're starting to eat their own. But how do we progress? I don't really know. I mean, it's happening technologically as well. People are looking at their own media outlets, their own blogs, etc., that reinforce what they think rather than challenging them with what someone else thinks. So I think we're really in an intellectual and cultural decline. I'm quite pessimistic about it and think I might have to give it all up and go gardening and not be so angstful about where things are going.
Well, if your gardening is as good as your TV hosting, it'll be a fabulous garden. As we were talking about people just shutting down opposition ideas, there's another group of people that I regularly talk with, and they're people who don't want to articulate any idea for fear of being cancelled. So they've decided they're not going to have a position on anything at all.
One of my children's exactly the same. Will not disclose anything, absolutely anything of their thoughts, unless it's in something like, well, I won't even say what it is in case I identify them. I mean, seriously. There's a whole generation that's grown up like that, and it's natural. I mean, it's the viciousness out there, particularly if you want to listen to, read Twitter. It is absolutely soul-destroying if you're a social animal. And most people are social animals. They don't like being excluded. They don't like being demonised, and so they keep quiet. It's most interesting and most dispiriting. I mean, you think of the ABC, how many staff do they have? That's about, I think, more than 3,000. Look at the George Pell case, for instance, right? He was absolutely innocent. The evidence is absolutely clear. He was innocent of child rape. And yet there's not one single person in that entire organisation devoted allegedly to the contest of ideas, the promotion of truth, that actually said so publicly that, hey, maybe he's actually innocent. Not a single one. Now, how's that? Well, part of it is fear.
Yeah. Andrew, I want to ask you about a story in the Daily Mail today that King Charles wants a diverse coronation ceremony, and so he's been pushing for the Church of England to allow representatives of other faiths, Muslims and Hindus, to pray to their gods during his coronation service. What do you make of that?
Well, I've got some sympathy with him because, of course, there's a lot of people of the Islamic and Hindu and Sikh faiths in Britain. There just are. I mean,
yes.
The Prime Minister is from Indian background. The Lord Mayor of London is from Muslim background. The First Minister of Scotland is from a Muslim background. I mean, it's the King's duty to unite. Now, if Christians don't like that, maybe they should proselytise a little more. I mean, I like the old traditional England kind of thing. I'm really at home in 19th century British literature. But the King's role is to unite a people. And I guess he feels that that's it. As long as he honours Christianity and doesn't slip into moral relativism, then you just have to shrug your shoulders. That's the way. If you have a mass immigration project, particularly from the third world, you have to then live with the consequences, adapt and make the best of them as you can.
I guess that raises the question then, when you've got mass immigration, you've got nations walking away from their Christian roots, what do you unite a country around? Or to ask it another way, if the Western world rejects Christianity as their uniting force, what replaces it?
Oh, huge question. I don't know. Anything, it seems. The answer is anything. And often it's a more dysfunctional kind of belief. I mean, the green religion is quite anti-human, for instance. It's just another form of ancient earth worship. And a lot of earth worshippers sort of swung to Christianity as more humane faith, a more tribalist faith. You know, I remember going, two anecdotes. I remember going to Africa and I was looking at, I'm not Christian, but I went to a church service in Uganda. And it was wonderful. I mean, lots of music. It was really quite gripping and it was terrific. It was wonderfully entertaining and quite moving. And I was speaking to a Christian there who was heading a charity, a Christian charity. And he said, you know, Africans really respond to the fact that Christians preach, love thy neighbour as thyself. And it goes across faiths, across ethnicity. I mean, St. Paul's message was exactly that. You know, there is no slave, there's no master, there's no Roman, we're all one under Christ. That is a message for Africa, which has been riven by tribalism.
Right.
And I actually saw that in operation. You know, Muslims could be helped by Christian charities as much as Christians. And it was wonderfully inspiring in a continent that's been devastated by tribalism. I've been to Rwanda in the aftermath, or just as civil war was coming to an end there. The tribalism there slaughtered so many of the population, right? It was horrific, the most horrific thing I've ever seen. So that was great. And also in Hong Kong, when I lived there, a lot of people in the pro-democracy movement were actually Catholic, educated Chinese. And in jail still, there's Jimmy Lai, one of the most courageous men I've ever known, who's a Christian. He was a billionaire, I think he was a billionaire, a publisher. He could have escaped Hong Kong anytime he liked. He put his freedom on the line to serve the people. And it's that ethos of service to others that I think marks Christianity above so many other faiths, others, whoever they are. And that's why I fear the decline of Christianity, much as I'm partially guilty myself not being Christian. I fear it because I don't see the other creeds preaching the same with the same sense of purpose and success.
Andrew Bolt, it's always a delight to talk to you. Happy Easter, and thanks so much for joining us tonight.